So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Joni Parsons. I'm creator of Revel 11, and Revel 11 is a community focused entirely on women, women coming together to share stories that are timely, informative, and fun. And one of the things that's so important to me is to see women sharing and supporting one another, because my ultimate goal in life is for women to take over the world faster. What do you think about that, Lisa?
Definitely.
Um, I'd love to tell you a little bit more about Lisa and what we're going to talk about, but this is our first conversation online in 2024, and we're talking about taking charge of our bodies, our boundaries, and our bank accounts. Why? Because when we feel good in our bodies, we're able to have clear boundaries, say no more often, and are financially secure. We are ready to take over the world. And that's really important. Lisa is founder of the Bad Bitch Empire, say that fast, a global community platform building unapologetic wealth and worth for women. She is a former Olympic gymnast, four-time USA national champion, and USA Hall of Fame gymnast turned serial entrepreneur, venture capitalist, speaker, executive coach, and host of the Bad Bitch Empire podcast. And now she's the author of this awesome book, I might add, called The Bad Bitch Business Bible. And I think I wore yellow today just for this book. But I have to say, like, Lisa, when I looked at this book, I'm a little intimidated. Am I a bad bitch? Am I somewhere in between? And I dove into your book, and this book, look, it's dog-eared, underlined, and I just got so much out of every single page. So thank you so much for writing this book. And while I think that it's really important to have a lot of bad bitch energy, I think it's also important to have divine feminine power. And I went to Lisa's Instagram account just to find out a little bit more about Lisa. And I just love this post that I want to read. And I want to invite you to really listen to this and get ready to dive in. So she asks, or she says, manifesting the life you want is an emotional and spiritual practice that begins with tapping into a deeper level of self-love and surrendering to your own divinity. And then she asks the questions. Okay, listen up. Do you truly see and believe in your worth? Are you giving yourself the love that you deserve? Are you giving yourself the space to heal and grow? Can you be open to receiving what is meant for you? So if you would share in the chat how those land for you, we'd love to know. So Lisa, I was just so impressed with that kind of juxtaposition between the badass and then the more softer, kind of what we would think is gentler, kinder, more feminine essence. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. And I'm
Yay.
so glad that it resonated. And it's always just so powerful for me to hear reflected from other women what they gain from the words and the book and the content.
Well, I just love that so much. So we are going to get to all of those today, and Lisa's going to talk about how we can embody both of those pieces. So let's first focus on your transformational journey from good girl to the bad bitch.
Yeah. So my background is as a US national champion gymnast, and I was a very obedient, shy, insecure girl that found the power of performance through the sport. And even as a gymnast, I was really ingrained with this notion of perfectionism. And, it's a sport that's really about getting the perfect 10 performance, doing exactly what your coaches say, doing what the judges want, and coming into that routine being the perfect 10 gymnast with the perfect smile and the perfect toes and perfect body. And I learned very early on that it was important to obey the rules and listen to authority. I was a straight A student. I worked really hard. My parents were immigrants, so I knew the importance and what was at stake, really, when your parents sacrificed to come to another country. And I went to Yale University to study literature, and then ultimately started my job in Wall Street as a corporate hedge fund analyst. And that was really when I started to, the first time going into a male dominated industry, really realizing that the traits that I had developed as a good girl, the perfectionism, the people pleasing, the obeying the status quo, the staying silent, just putting my head down and working harder, hoping people would recognize it, that was not serving me in a workplace where I saw men who had half the talent and half the skill and half the work ethic as I did rise faster, get paid more. And I just really started thinking about that because I, one, was unhappy, and two, I was like, this is not going to get better as I advance in the workplace. What has to change? And I think alongside that was also a big internal struggle that I had with imposter syndrome and feeling like I wasn't good enough. So I start my book, The Bad Bitch Business Bible, with the line, I spent my whole life feeling like I wasn't enough.
Mhm.
And for
And
a lot of women
excuse me,
who, yeah.
yes, excuse me. Well, how many people have felt like that? I mean, I certainly have. I think this is something that we can all agree as women that we feel often. So sorry to interrupt, but I think it's really important that we know that this is something that we have all felt as women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this lack of enoughness was something that I started exploring in myself because having experienced success and external validation early on from the gold medal, straight A's, Ivy League degree, good job, I noticed that there was a gap between the external metrics of success and the internal feelings of lack of worthiness, lack of enoughness. And it was almost like the more I achieved outside, the more imposter syndrome I had on the inside, because it was like my level of confidence, my level of worthiness was still at that same level. And so I sought to figure out, how do I close this gap? And then I would notice, I talk about the confidence of walking into the room with the confidence of a mediocre white man. And I was like, how do they have that confidence? And also the I didn't have other women who directly were mentors or role models that I could look up to that were really paving their own path unapologetically. And so what I've always done to grow and evolve as a woman is to imagine and project the woman that I could be. So at that moment, I remember I would walk into the bathroom mirror, and every day I would notice, first thing, I didn't like this pimple, I didn't like this wrinkle, I would criticize, different parts of my body. And I was like, this is not how a woman who loves herself speaks to herself.
Mhm.
And if I'm starting every day of my journey criticizing myself, doubting myself, fearing failure, fearing that other people won't like me, silencing my voice, suppressing my truth, this isn't going to work. And so what I've done, what I did was I projected this version of myself, and I saw this woman, this bad bitch, and in my mind, this upgraded version of Lisa, bad bitch Lisa, she was unapologetic, she was unstoppable, she was confident, she didn't give a F about what anybody thought about her. She knew her worth. She made money unapologetically. And I was like, I want to be her. And I was
So
like,
I
yeah.
love that so much. I mean, so many things that just resonated with me right then about how we look in the mirror and we're so critical of ourselves, how we have that negative self-talk all the time. And then, like you said, you see a mediocre, male sometimes, and there's this strut that they have that when they're walking into the corporate boardroom, I used to be in corporate many years ago, and it's like, no, why don't I have that strut? So one thing that I love about your book is that you give some examples. Again, the Bad Bitch Business Bible. And I loved what you said here. It's on page 22, and it says, "In my bad bitch dream, my future self will be." Begins her day with her dream morning routine. She starts her dream work day with, like, what kind of work is she doing? What does your dream workspace look like? During the day, she is closing checks and making bank. It's like all of these things to really set the intention about moving forward into more of our power as women. And it goes on, but I'll let you buy the book to learn more about that. But all these questions, Lisa, are so good for us to ask ourselves as women. And what if we started like really having that confidence, that feminine power to start embodying all of this? What would happen? What would happen to the world? What would happen to us individually?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll just first even talk about my experience unleashing my bad bitch self and unleashing my brand, the Bad Bitch Empire, the book, the Bad Bitch Business Bible. This woman that you see on the cover is me. And it's like when I'm stepping into that bad bitch self, I like put on my leather, my lace, my ponytail, and I'm like, world, get out of my way. And I think that my experience coming from Silicon Valley, Wall Street, where it's over 90% men. I launched the Bad Bitch Empire actually at the Bitcoin conference. So I think that was like literally 95% guys at
Oh,
this
of
conference.
course.
And I walked in wearing my big braid, my lingerie, my black leather skirt, and I was like, the Bad Bitch Empire is here. And I brought with me all of like every single woman at the Bitcoin conference was basically at this party. And I
Bet you got
co-sponsored it.
noticed.
Yeah, I co-sponsored it with a crypto hedge fund and also a crypto venture fund. So I was coming in as an equal, a third co-sponsor. And right before the party, I was going around the conference with interviewing guys on the street who are at the conference, asking them, what do you think it will take to create gender equality in crypto and Web3? How do we get more women into this industry? And I went up to this one man, and this Instagram post actually ended up going viral. And I said to him, what do you think it will take to get more women into this industry? And he looks me up and down and he says, well, not to dress like you. And I was like,
What you gonna do with that?
and it was so funny because I'd already embodied the bad bitch. So the words kind of just like bounced off. And in the video, I'm like, tell me more about what you just said. And you see him then stuttering. He's like, well, like, and he said some nonsensical things. There's something about like models and how it's not helping anything. And I was like, okay. But what I realized why the video became so popular is because I didn't react to him. And what he was the reason why he was taken aback was that he made this comment, and I just said, tell me more. And I think what I've noticed is that a lot of men, when a woman is bold and irreverent and loves her body, and I just thought, I look great in this, it's not hurting anybody, and it's not like the guys they're wearing, ugly hoodies and sweatpants. It's like, I don't think that's the right attire for a conference either. And yeah, so it was like the fact that I didn't react and didn't respond because I just saw it as a projection of his own insecurities and was actually just curious about why he would say that he was like, wait, that's not how this is supposed to work. I'm supposed to make her feel bad. This is supposed to be condescending, and now she's not taking it. And that same thing happened again, where again, like I'm showing up as an embodied version where I'm like, I love myself, I love my brand, I know what it stands for, and and I was in a Zoom call with 30 male investors. So we have the Bad Bitch Empire Fund, which is a venture fund investing in high growth female-led tech companies. And everyone had an opportunity to present their fund. I was the only woman presenting my fund to a group of investors. And I talked about the Bad Bitch Empire Fund thesis, why I was investing in female-led tech companies, my investment track record, my overall track record of success. And at the end of my presentation, one of the investors comes up and he says, I don't know if we will be able to invest because some of our investors might be offended by your name. And I looked at him and I just said, well, if you're offended by it, just don't invest. Thank you.
Exactly.
Next.
I
And I
think
moved
one of
on,
the
and his jaw dropped, and like all the other men were like, oops. And I
maybe
think
I should
again,
invest in her.
he what he wanted was for me to, I don't know,
Different.
grovel or
Mhm.
prove myself or seek validation or justify why I had the name Bad Bitch Empire. And the fact that I again didn't react was almost like he was confused by it. And I don't think it comes out consciously. I do like what I recognized is that he could have asked me any number of things. He could have asked me about my track record, my investment thesis, my past investments, the portfolio, but he chose to nitpick at the most inane thing that made no difference to the actual performance of the fund. And that choice showed to me his internal misogyny and sexism. And so I realized that what my brand does, which is really about, unapologetically embracing your power as a woman, is that it very quickly draws out that subconscious sexism and misogyny, especially in men, where they just kind of fall into that trap. And I realize it because those are the types of men who are outwardly supportive of women and gender equality, so long as it is palatable and doesn't actually challenge the system that we're in. And
Mhm.
when you have self-love, when you have self-respect, you are irreverent to the systems that are creating inequality, right? You're like, most of corporate world doesn't work. It's not helping women. Most of even Silicon Valley and investments, it's 95% dominated by men. As women, we're getting these scraps that are left over from the men. And it's like, well, I don't like this system. It's not serving me. Why should I adhere to your rules? And so when you come in with that irreverence, which is what this brand like just immediately kind of shows, they become uncomfortable,
Mhm.
especially the
And
ones who
Lisa,
are
but what
invested.
I like about this for all of us women is that you stood in your power in both of those instances, that you didn't back down. And I think that as women, being trained as good girls from, really, I mean, my whole life I've been a good girl. And I like that you're taking a different approach that is like stand in my power, show up like that, know what your power is, and be unapologetic about it. I mean, our lives would be much different if if we showed up like that on a daily basis,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's also, um, it, it's, it was very scary initially to come out as a bad bitch and with a brand like this from in a professional sphere. And I knew that there were going to be critics and there would be haters and there would be pushback. And the thing is that, of course, there were, but with every one of those, there were just as many women who were like, wow, I'll never forget the one comment this one woman said. She was an investor. She said, Lisa, it's like watching you go to the edge gives me permission to take a baby step. Like I might
Mhm.
not be ready to step out in a like lingerie or not, but like at least I could put out a selfie of myself and own my wins.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I realized is really powerful about this work is that um if you think about why is it that you're afraid to show up as your full self, to speak up. And it's because there's some fear of what other people will say about you. They'll say, maybe, oh, she's a bitch. She's too aggressive. She is too opinionated. She's crazy. She's dramatic. She's whatever it is. Right. And I think the biggest superpower that I have gained by unleashing the bad bitch in me is realizing that my opinion of myself is the most important one. And I know that I am championing and embodying a really powerful mission. I know that my intention is great in terms of like I really care about female leadership. I believe that women have a source of power within them that has been suppressed for far too long. And if that offends someone, then that's actually more a reflection of their insecurity or their inability to actually see change.
So in addition to being the founder of Rebel 11, I also have a communications company here in Seattle. I've had it for 32 years. I started it when I was 27 years old. And, being an entrepreneur from a very early age, I've encountered everything that you are talking about, Lisa, from, oh my gosh, she's such a bitch, she's so intimidating. I got that so often. And I didn't really, at that point in my life, when I was a lot younger, I didn't know what to do with it. But now I just realized that the men or other women who said that about me just, you know, I shouldn't have cared. And I just, what I did do is I just kept going and kept moving forward every day with, my desire to have an impactful communications company and to do things differently and to do it my way. And you know what? I've had people work for me for 15 plus years and, just have clients for 20 years because I built my own company on my terms. And, when I was in corporate, I just want to share, like, I didn't understand how the corporate world ran, and it made no sense to me at a very early age. And that's why I started my own company. And what I'm seeing now with young women, like you, Lisa, and others, that they're stepping into their power at a much younger age, and they're helping one another grow and elevate. And that is such an important trait for women to help women. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I will also say that my brand has triggered women. And particularly women, I would say of a previous generation, or like, because I'm a zillennial, part millennial, part Gen Z. And I believe that, so one thing that is very important to remember is how you judge someone else is how you judge yourself. How you judge other women is how you judge yourself. So I say that there are 3 levels of transcendent power for a woman to really embrace, and they are the ones that we are most uncomfortable with. So when I say them, and if you feel a level of discomfort in your body, I would take a moment to ask yourself why. So those 3 levels of power are sexual power, spiritual power, and financial power. And the reason these 3 areas of power are so important, and why some women are uncomfortable with that in other women and in themselves, is because those are the 3 areas in which we have been most shamed for. So anytime a woman shows her sexuality, her sensuality, it is a threat, because that is so powerful when a woman loves her body and just thinks, I'm beautiful. I love how I look. I love my body. And men will be like, that's inappropriate. And the people who are saying it's inappropriate is actually because when you realize everything from religion has said, women must be Virgin Mary, or, virgin, whatever it is. But men, they can do whatever they want. And this idea that a woman's sexuality has made men go to war, right? Like, men say it's inappropriate because it's distracting. And it said, well, why don't you just get your mind out of the gutter? It's like, instead of telling women to wear suits just like you. And so it makes people very uncomfortable when a woman loves her body, loves her pleasure, and loves her sexuality. Then there's spiritual power. We think of all the women who have been burned as witches, because we had this intuition, we had this connection and understanding of energy and frequency and seeing something beyond just the very rational and tangible things. And she was called crazy. She was called overdramatic. She was called, something evil. And then financial power. There's no mistake why women are shamed for wanting money. A man, can say, he wants to make a lot of money. He buys his Lamborghini, his Rolex, he buys bottle service at the club. No one bats an eye. But a woman says, I want to make a ton of money so that I can live a free life. And by the way, I would love to go shopping at the designer store and also treat myself to a really nice spa date. And then they're like, well, she's so selfish. She should be giving her money to charity. And it's like, well, why is there that double standard? And it's this continual shame around these 3 areas that makes us feel trapped, because we're never allowed to fully express ourselves. And so when you meet a woman who has released shame from her vocabulary, released shame from her body, she actually feels very comfortable feeling beautiful, loving herself, taking care of herself, prioritizing herself, and saying, this is how I like to show up. And the discomfort, again, comes from everything has been twisted from the male gaze and the male opinion. And so when we think that women are doing things to gain attention, to be objectified, that's usually because, again, it's a male lens that has controlled media.
Mhm. That's so true. So I did start my career in the media, um, at several affiliate stations here in Seattle and in San Francisco, and I saw that all the time. I mean, and then you just look at the ads and understand where the sexuality is coming from. I think that it's so important to be able to own your feminine essence, that feminine power, and however you want to dress, and just own it and show up. I see some of the most powerful women here in Seattle and all over the world that are just being themselves, like letting them show their feminine side and be in their power too. I think one of the things I'd love to talk about, Lisa, is that the women, like, when are we going to get um, pay equality? Like, when are we going to step into that? And like you said, gender equality earlier on. When do you think that's going to happen?
I think it is really reliant at this point of women making different choices, because there's two forces at play. One is external forces, right? Pre-existing systems, which is controlled by men. And so one choice is, well, we continue to try and work within the system and work really hard and hope that they give us a promotion and beg for scraps. And in that way, it will take, I don't know, many, many lifetimes to get equality. And it truly is that the fastest way that women can create change is through creating different economies that serve women. So that is being an entrepreneur. So if I am a woman creating bras for other women, my market is women. Women are paying me for the bras that I'm creating. If I'm
Spanx.
creating, beauty products, body products,
Mhm.
healthcare services, things that only women, like women know that customer. And you could very easily, for example, when you become an entrepreneur, say, I want to create a business that serves women. Now you are just transacting in an economy that is based off of working with women. And you don't need to then follow the rules of, well, what does he think about it? I'm like, I don't care what he thinks about it. He's not paying me. And unless you're paying me money to give you a great product or give you a great service, why do I care about your opinion? And
Well,
I
I mean,
think,
look at the success of Spanx. I mean, just alone, just targeted at women. And one of the things that's super interesting is that women-owned businesses are usually much more successful than male-owned businesses. Have you heard that stat as well?
yeah,
The
they have
success
more
rate
revenue.
is much higher, which I love so much.
Yeah.
Continue on.
Women tend to be more responsible with the money. They are more community driven. They tend to create businesses that naturally make positive impact. And so, um, usually when I talk to any female entrepreneur or someone who's thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, she's like, oh, I really have this problem that I see myself and other women having, and I really want to solve that. So it comes from a much more holistic and positive impact driven perspective. And we are also more responsible with repaying investors. We don't just take money, or the majority of women don't just take money and throw massive parties the way a lot of these male founders do. And yeah, so with all of that said, the the understanding of who it is that you really want to serve, whose opinion you really want to basically take into account, it has to do with where you're going to choose to spend your time and make your living. And yeah, that's, as we know, entrepreneurship is not easy at all. So,
It's a roller coaster.
and so the choice for a lot of women becomes, well, do I want the safety and stability, but slow death of my spirit in a corporate world? Which, for some women manage to get to the senior and top position. So I'm not discrediting that. But again, to your question originally was like, how long will it take to get to that equality? And if we all just stay in corporate where 90% of the senior leaders are men, it's going to be a very, very, very slow progress versus if more women actually, figured out how to take that leap into entrepreneurship, which begins first and foremost with your own personal transformation.
I just want to go back to what you said about women really taking care of community and giving back. We were in conversation last week at an in-person event here in Seattle with a woman named Karen Sherman, and she's working in Rwanda and helping women elevate there, giving them jobs. And she goes, she's worked all over the world globally with women, from war-torn countries to, to the US. And she goes, all women want is to be able to take care of themselves and their families. And that's their driving force. And if we keep moving forward in that direction, taking care of our community, ourselves, and our family, the world is going to be a much better place. So in your book, Lisa, you quote Betty Friedan from the Feminine Mystique. And this is the quote: "Who knows what women can be when they are finally free to be themselves?" I love this so much. So I'm just going to say it again. Who knows what women can be when they are finally free to be themselves? And I really think that this is what you're talking about, is to step into yourself as a woman, to that feminine mystique, to that feminine power. And what happened to you when you stepped into that into yourself, really got rid of that good girl and just became you.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the two things: shame, guilt, shame, guilt, and fear are the three big burdens that a good girl carries with her. Fear of failure, fear of disappointing other people, fear of what other people think, fear of not being good enough, fear of being unworthy, fear of not reaching her potential, fear of not being a good enough mother, sister, daughter, friend, colleague, leader, constantly doubting herself, and just carrying unnecessary weight of shame and guilt. And so I think it's important to ask yourself, where do you carry that guilt? Where do you carry that shame? Where does that show up in your internal narrative from a day-to-day basis? And sometimes if you're just beginning this process of self-awareness, I think another area that's very important is, where do I judge other women? In what areas do I feel judgment or jealousy towards other women? Where I feel that where you might condescend another woman for being a certain way. And I think that, so first of all, jealousy is just a very good indication of an area where you are not fully expressing yourself. So for example, if you see a woman who, she got her own TV show, she got her own book, she's doing speaking engagements, you're like, why does she get all of that when I'm here and I have so much talent? So that might be a narrative that you have. And so I think that if you are truly in a place of abundance, then you would say, oh, okay, that's an indication that there's a part of me that I'm not fully stepping into, that I'm still not really realizing my dreams. And maybe let me turn that into, maybe I'll reach out to her and express my admiration. Like, wow, I really love the way you express your voice, and congratulations on how much you've accomplished. I would really love to learn from you. And I just wanted to let you know that, you really inspire me.
And that's so important in this age of social media as well. I just want to point this out, that you can compare all day long about this person or that person, instead of saying, that's a real inspiration. Well, let me take some hints over here from this person and make them my own and be successful in that way. I think it's a really important thing to just elevate other women that you're learning from. So Lisa, in your book, you have 10 commandments to break free of the good girl brainwashing, but I really want to focus on even more around taking charge of your body, boundaries, and bank account. Like, why did you focus on those three things?
Yeah. So your body is The
So
way you treat
important.
your body, the way you treat yourself is the beginning of everything. And some people will say, well, what does your body have anything to do with business? And I say it has everything to do with business, because if you look in the mirror, let's say you stand in front of the mirror naked and you hate what you see. You are saying you need to lose weight, too many wrinkles, gray hair, I don't like it. How do you think you can show up and own your worth in the workplace? How do you think you can really ask for a raise when there's a significant part of you that doesn't even like you? And so the body, I say, is your relationship with yourself, your voice, the woman you see in the mirror. And once you've really worked on your relationship with yourself, then you go into boundaries, which is your relationship with the world, the external world, and everybody else. How do you set those boundaries to respect yourself, to respect another person, to abide by your values, to create and curate a really powerful network and friendship group around you? And then bank account then is the outflow of that, which is your
Everything.
relationship to money.
Mhm.
And the relationship to money for women in particular is a very tricky one. Again, going back to those three types of power, the financial power. We are not in a system that serves us in any sort of financial capacity. 90% of the money articles targeted at men are about investing in growth, and 90% of the money articles targeted at women are about saving and spending less. That's another area
I
where we
thought that
also,
was a really interesting observation that you put in the book. I was like, wow, that is so true.
yeah, yeah.
It's really true.
And again, another area that many people, this men and women, will judge. It's much easier to say, oh, those rich people are so stuck up and they're terrible and they don't, they should be giving to charity. And you can sit there and judge people, and condemn their choices and say that they're bad people. Or you could talk about, the trigger. It's like, where is that judgment coming from? So let's then point it to yourself. Is there areas in your life where you feel shame around money? Maybe you feel like you haven't made the money that you deserve, or maybe you haven't really examined your relationship, perhaps growing up without the wealth. And a lot of women, have come from those places where we've had to work really, really hard to earn our money, and we've seen times of financial hardship. And so I think all of that is really realizing and reframing your relationship with money as a positive energetic source.
So one of the things that you talked about in the book is our money stories. And, as you talked about, like really looking at how you grew up. For instance, I grew up very poor my whole story, my whole life, because my mom was rob Peter to pay Paul. And that was really comforting for me because that's how I grew up. I think one of the really interesting pieces in your book, Lisa, is how you dealt with your money story and how you really took it on. Can you share a little bit about that? I thought I took some notes from that, well, throughout your whole book, but from my own money story, like how do I change that paradigm and move it to a much more successful money story than I've had in the past? So can you talk
Yeah.
about yours?
Yeah, so I grew up as the daughter of immigrants. They immigrated from China. My dad with, a few $100s in his pocket, and I remember having dinner at the local Sam's Club where we'd eat free samples for dinner. So that was really early days, and one of my key money memories was cutting coupons with my mom on Sunday and going shopping, always going to the discount rack area, and feeling really proud when I found when I gave the coupon to the cashier and we got to see the savings. And so my experience was really that saving is really important, and that money is hard to come by, and that you have to work really, really hard if you want to have money. And so what I learned was the value of money, but what I also learned or did not learn was the value of my time. And so I thought there was a direct correlation with the amount that you work, the amount that you sacrifice, the amount that you hustle with the amount of money you make. And now we learn going into our careers, when you see how men make money, they're not necessarily working 10 times as hard for 10 times the money. It's about who you know, it's about your confidence, it's about the conviction that you have in the service and quality of things that you bring to the table. And part of that rewiring, again, was going into the workforce, then realizing this needs to change. And my relationship to money is not serving me, and it's not going to get me to where I need to go. And so I think that what I talk about in the book was this: how do you think about a way to think about your relationship to money is like thinking about it like a romantic relationship. So you can be in a healthy relationship where you help each other grow, you nurture each other, you communicate well. And so that equivalent is with money, you feel very relaxed with money, you feel secure in your money, and you know where it is, you communicate with it regularly, you nurture it, you invest it, you help it grow. Or where more women are, they're either avoidant or they're anxious about money. So they feel like every time they think about money, they're anxious, like they don't know if there's going to be enough, they're afraid to spend it, they're afraid to invest it. And they're like, okay, if there's not enough, I got to keep it suffocated in my savings account in case there's an emergency, and I have to have my emergency fund, and you don't want to part with it. Or you might be avoidant and you're just like, actually, I don't really want to look at my bank account because it makes me uncomfortable to look at the money leaving. And, when you avoid it, it doesn't mean the problem goes away. Right. And so sometimes it just gets worse. And I had an avoidant relationship with money because it didn't make me feel good whenever I looked at it. I was like, I feel like there should be more. I feel like I'm not getting compensated my worth. And so the problem is that the more you stay in that avoidant or anxious attachment to money, then the money doesn't, it's like a relationship, right? Like the money doesn't want to come then. Like, why would the money want to stay in a relationship with someone who's anxious and avoidant? Wouldn't the money want to be with someone who wants to nurture it and help it grow? So I think that's a really interesting way to think about your money relationship.
Yes, very much. And deserving. You deserve money. You deserve to be able to invest, make money. I was just in a conversation with one of our advisory board members with Rebel 11, and she said she and her husband were having a conversation about how they made about the same amount of money in the corporate world. And he had so much more money than she did. And this is just to your point, Lisa. She goes, I put it in the bank. I wanted to be safe for my family. She has 2 kids, and she took that route. He took the investment route and now has, so much more money than she did. Just to your point about how we use money. So let's talk about boundaries, because I think that is so important. I mean, we've talked about that a lot already, but I think it's really important to say no more often. What other boundaries do you think that we should have as we're looking at life and moving forward in our world, in our personal world?
Yeah, well, it's really about values, and everyone has
Mhm.
different values for themselves. I think it's true that the 5 people you spend the most time with are going to be the ones who influence you the most and can have an inordinate influence on your success in life. And um, the thing that I think, though, that is perhaps less obvious is your boundaries with yourself. And when I say that, it's like your boundaries with your own mind. And our minds tend to be the things that sabotage us the most. It's our own mental blocks, our own self-doubt, our own self-sabotage. And so when you think about going back to how do you speak to yourself for the majority of the day? Do you feel like, oh, it's not good enough, I'm not good enough, I don't know if I can do this, I don't know what people will think about me? And when you notice that, you need to draw a boundary with yourself and say, okay, I don't, these thoughts are not helping me. And so I talk about this in the book too, like identifying the good girl voices that are sabotaging you. um, and it's those voices that don't belong to your most authentic and powerful self. It's the voices that say, that come from your parents, that come from your society, that come from community, that come from religion, that come from media, that you have then adopted into your mind, believing that that's your real voice. And it's like, well, why would your most authentic, higher, most powerful self, why would she say to you, you're not good enough? Why would she say to you that you're unworthy? And you're
We're
like, does
so
that
mean to
voice
ourselves.
actually belong to me? And so when you start to separate that, you're like, okay, let me create boundaries. Like all this negative self-doubting stuff, that goes over here. That goes in the trash. I
Mhm.
want to choose
Yes.
voices that only tell me that you got this, girl. You're going to do it. And
Amen.
you have the power to create the reality and the life of your dreams. And I think too often we fixate on being the victim of
Mhm.
what other people say about us, the
So
way other
true.
people shape us. And so there's just the above all, be the heroine, not the victim of your life.
Okay, let's just say that. I want everybody to say that. Be the heroine, not the victim in your life. That's awesome. Thank you. So, I want to talk about how do you suggest women step into the best version of themselves? And I know you have an offer as well.
Yeah. So I think it's just first and foremost what I just said. I think if you take an exercise away from this, journal tonight. What are the good girl voices and thoughts that I want to keep or throw away, and what are the bad bitch voices and beliefs that I do want to keep? And I say that a woman steps into her full power not when she is finally given permission to do so, but when she realizes she never needed it in the first place. And
Mhm.
thinking about permission, where in your life are you waiting for someone else's permission to step into your power? I see this comment from Natasha. She says, unfortunately, my dad told me it was wrong to take a job from a guy who may have to support a family. And my mother continually tells me that I will never be as great as anyone else. So this actually is exactly what I just said. Well, those voices don't belong to you. Those voices belong to your father and to your mother. And
Yes.
there is a lot of work, I understand, that we must go through. And this is why I talk about so much in my book, my roots, and that there are certain beliefs that your family is going to instill on you, but it is your responsibility to rise above that. And there's a great quote by Carl Jung that says, is like what happened to you may not have been your fault, but your healing and your response is your responsibility. And that's what I mean about being the heroine and bad bitch of your life, is when you choose to stay in victim mentality, you stay in, well, other people are saying this about me. Other people are telling me I can't do it. Other people have made me feel this way. And the question then for you is, well, how long are you going to stay stuck in that? And at what point are you going to reclaim your life and reclaim your power and say, that is not my story anymore? I choose not to stay a victim, and I'm going to write this next chapter of my life. And I say it's never too late to start a new chapter, and you're always just one decision away to from changing your life entirely. So if you don't like those voices or people who are influencing you, then the way to reclaim your power is just to make that decision that you're going to choose differently.
Thank you for that. I think that, there's so many, I will just say, I have so many friends that are one decision away. It's like you can make this change. And, in my life as well, everybody has that opportunity to make a change, to reclaim again, to reclaim their life, to reclaim their goals, to reclaim their heart or their passion, like whatever that is. And I'm so grateful that we're talking about that today, Lisa. It's a message that all of us need to hear. And I know that you have an offer about a masterclass up and coming. Can
Yeah.
you tell us about that?
Yeah. So the Bad Bitch Boot Camp is going to
Bad Bitch Boot
be
Camp.
a transformational 1 month journey to break free of good girl brainwashing, to ignite that divine feminine power, and to truly unleash the unapologetic bad bitch within. And it goes through, I've created a 6 stage journey that women go through in their journey from going from good girl to bad bitch that took me, God knows what,
How many
20,
years?
over a decade. And so
Uh-huh.
the way the journey through this is, it starts from the death of the good girl. And, you know, so like I said, there's one thing about, yes, you're now aware maybe that you have good girl issues, but there needs to be a clear delineation. And the first module that we go through is the death. How do you shed all of that fully from your energy, from your aura, from your body? And then we go into the awakening of your feminine power. And I think that this is where sometimes women get confused, where they're like, wait, but am I soft and feminine and, you know, flowy, or am I a bad bitch who's like going after dreams, and can I be both? And this is the module where we really learn how to hold those in balance and integrate them, because there's a time and place for both, and you are allowed to be both. But we find areas where you're afraid to unleash some of that feminine power and awaken those. Then we go into the third stage, which is the rebirth. And that's the rebirth where we really unleash, embody the bad bitch, the biggest, boldest, unapologetic version of you. How do you walk into the boardroom, the bedroom, any room you want,
Any room you
unapologetically?
want.
And then there's the third three modules, the latter three, are the next one is, this is actually a very important one that a lot of us overlook. I call it the slaying, and it's where you overcome resistance. Because the moment you start to step out as that bad bitch unleashed version of you, there is going to be haters. There's going to be critics. Men and women are going to come out of the woodwork and tell you, you know, call you names and stuff. They won't like the boundaries that you're setting. They won't like this new power that they're seeing, because it becomes a threat to them. And so when we talk about how do you slay the resistance, how do you become unbothered and really silence the haters, and do it in a loving way. And then
So good.
and I find that only after you've really experienced that, I like talking about dark and light energy. So a lot of that is dark energy that's being thrown at you when you
Mhm.
start coming into the light. Is the next module then is about the calling, and that's how do you step onto your divine path and purpose. And that's, a lot of us have lost that connection to our own spiritual source, because we've been so programmed to do what other people say is appropriate or a practical path. And so this is where we really tap into your own divinity as a woman, like being a daughter of Mother Nature, of this universe. And then the last module of Unleashing Your Bad Bitch is, I call the Ascension and Becoming Queen. And this is where you become the master of your destiny. And especially as a leader, how do you become a leader of your movement, your mission, and embody being the queen of your empire, you know, wherever you're building that. And I think that that's the 6-step process that I take women through, where it feels like, you know, there's awakenings down every path and epiphanies, and it's just a very powerful transformation to go through in the Bad Bitch Boot
Well,
Camp.
that sounds amazing. How do people learn more about that?
Yeah, so that's starting in mid-February, and there's a wait list right now, but I would love to share that with you. It will be on well, what you need to do is actually go to Bad Bitch Empire, sign up for the newsletter. And
Okay.
then I'm actually going to be dropping the podcast that's going to be talking about that. So you get access to the Bad Bitch Empire podcast. You can also find that on Apple and Spotify. And 2, you can get on the wait list once the email newsletter goes out later tonight. And I'll also send you the link, so you guys, everyone on this call, can get early access to it.
Yeah, why don't you send that to me, and I'll send that to everybody who has signed up today, and even those who signed up that aren't here right now. I just want to thank you so much. There's a couple of great little things in the chat here. It's like, love the ascension, and the boot camp sounds amazing. I would agree with that, Divya. And then Jackie said, I agree with the dark energy, and Natasha, thank you for all of your comments. We really appreciate your engagement. Lisa, this has been so great. I learned so much, again, not just from today, but from your fabulous book. as I mentioned early on, I've got so many underlines, things that I want to go back to, things that I want to really dive into, and I'm ready to reclaim a lot of things in my own life, and I encourage everyone else to do too, regardless if there's fear associated with it. So much success to you, Lisa, and I can't wait to see what you continue to do in your life. And thank you for joining us on Revel 11 today.